So let's begin, as we have for now over a year, davening that the zchut of our learning should help to bring home the hostages, protect our soldiers and all of the innocents and Am Yisrael, and bring an end to all of our conflicts. And with that, we will begin. So we didn't quite finish this sugya last week, and I also feared that both Michael, Werner, and Paul were getting a little bit too tired at the end. But I want to go back because the sugya, the way the sugya is phrased and structured is a little bit difficult. Maybe that's b'lashon hamata, to say the least. And I want to point out some things that I think should make it a little bit easier to read the Gemara. And I'm not sure that we're going to go and try to read through Rashi word by word, even though I'm going to try to get through the sugya the way Rashi understands the sugya. But it starts to get complicated when you talk about the years and how many years before and this and that. And so I want to put this into perspective by going back to the Mishnah that we're discussing. So the Mishnah that we're discussing starts here. It's at the very top of Pei Bet Amud Aleph. Just 1 second. We need to focus on something that I should have focused on more from the beginning, and that's simply how to read the Mishnah. So, Michael Werner, why don't you read the Mishnah? We're starting from here where it says Hatinokot. Oh, you're muted.
התינוקות, אין מענין אותן ביום הכיפורים, אבל מחנכין אותן לפני שנה ולפני שנתיים, בשביל שיהיו רגלים במצוות.
Okay, so first translate the Mishnah.
Atinokot, children, presumably. We do not fast them on Yom, or they are not fasted on Yom Kippur. However, they are prepared a year before and 2 years before, in order that they should be accustomed to the mitzvot.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, me'anin.
Or that we afflict, yes, okay.
Okay, so right, we don't afflict them. That's the literal translation on Yom Kippur. Mechanchin means we educate them. It's not mechinim. Mechinim would be prepare. Mechanchin is we educate. Okay?
Right.
Chinuch. Okay, so that's fine. But our question is, Lifnei shana, lifnei shnatayim. Before a year and before 2 years. So what does that mean? Before a year and before 2 years? What's the referent? What is it before?
From the context, we might assume that it's 2 years before they cease to have the status of tinukot.
Okay, very good. You might say that. It's not clear. I could also understand it. So I could also understand before a year and before 2 years, before the time that I make them fast, before the time that I'm a ninotan. And that may not be the same as when they reach their age of majority. So bear that in mind. This question of exactly what lifnei shana and lifnei shnatayim, this is not clear from the Mishnah. Now, we know the first question of the Gemara. So here,
Shane,
yes,
can I ask a grammatical question? It's all
please.
the time, yes. Why in the Mishnah you have this floating between Zachar and Nekeba? מחנכים, אותם, במקום, instead of אותם, and so on. It's just this influence of the Aramaic or something like this.
So that's exactly right. Here, it's not right because in a, let's say, in a pure Hebrew, you might argue that if we're talking about boys in particular or people in general, we tend to put lashon zachar, and you would say that it should be ein ma'anim, aval mechanchim otam. It should have, but you're right. It's the Aramaic influence, and that so it comes out. It's a funny thing, but in Mishnaic Hebrew there was still a heavy Aramaic influence. Aramaic was still the lingua franca at the time of the Mishnah. So even though the Mishnah was written in Hebrew, but it was heavily influenced by Aramaic and also to a lesser degree Greek. I don't know about grammar because I don't know Greek, but a lot of Greek words enter into Hebrew under, from the time that the Greeks, from the Hellenistic times. And Koine Greek, I'm not trying to say Koine or Koine Greek, is also spoken at that time. So there are these outside influences. So that's the quick answer to your question. There's I haven't read this in a long time, but in the standard Vilna edition of the Mishnah, not the Gemara, but the Mishnah, there's an essay at the beginning that talks about Lashon HaMishnah. It goes through some of these concepts and influences. Okay.
In this
However,
case, it causes a mix-up between girls and boys. And maybe one Lifnei Shana or Lifnei Shnatayim, maybe it has got something to do with the boys and the girls, which don't have the bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah at the same age.
so you're right. And we saw this late, it's even more pronounced later in the Gemara, which we're going to see in a moment. Michael Werner, are you still with us? Okay. No, once you close your eyes, I know you think that you're listening, but I know that you're gone. So if you can stay up, it's fine. If you can't, I also understand. Right. So right now, we don't know, right? Because it's going to be for boys and girls. In other words, the din in principle has to apply to both boys and girls because both men and women are obligated to fast on Yom Kippur. So now we're just discussing what our chiyuv is as parents. What is our chiyuv toward our children? Since they don't technically have a chiyuv, but what do we do? And so you're right, that's another issue, and it's not clear from here. So we have this question, lifnei shana v'lifnei shnatayim, a year before and 2 years prior to what? We're not sure. We're not sure from the Mishnah. Now here, I will refer us to Rashi. So Rashi says, Mechanchin otan, in his girsa, it says Mechanchin oto. It's another girsa altogether, that meaning the child, even though it started off in the plural. Mechanchin oto lishaot lifnei shana, shehi smucha lepirkan. Rashi understands that what it means, lifnei shana, we educate them by hours, which is the Gemara brings a braita for that later, but the idea being that we don't make them fast the whole day, but they have to fast by hours, meaning we feed them later than usual. A year lifnei shana, a year before shehi smucha lepirkan, a year before. The implication is the year before, the year that's close to their coming of age. And here he explains Pirkan. So when's Pirkan? When's their coming of age? Havi ben 13 lenekeva v'arba'asrei lezachar, which we understand it means 12 years in a day for a girl and 13 years in a day for a boy, into the 13th year, into the 14th year. And why is there a difference? Okay, because girls mature faster than boys. Shnat Shtemesrei, so the 12th year, he shana lifnei shana hasmucha lepirko. Right, so for the girl, right, for the girl, her perek is when she's 13 in a day. So the year before that is when she's 12 in a day. For the boy, it's a year later. So the way Rashi reads the Mishnah, he's saying, Lifnei Shana, it's a year before the year that's close to their perek. O Lifnei Shtei Shanim, Shehi Lifnei Shtei Shanim Samuch Lepirko. It's 2 years before the year that's close to their perek. Dahainu Shalosh Shanim Lifnei Pirkan. So that would be 3 years before they reach maturity. So Rashi introduces, this is the way Rashi understands Lifnei Shana Lifnei Shnatayim. So we can understand, just from reading the Mishnah, that there are 2 ways of understanding Lifnei Shana Lifnei Shnatayim. One is a year, like what Michael Werner said, that it's a year before they become adults, right, for this purpose. It's a year before their perek, or 2 years before their perek. Rashi understands it's a year before the year that's close to their perek. So the Gemara says, okay, so Paul, why don't you read Hashta?
השתא בפני שתיים מחנכים להוא, לפני שנה מביע,
Mibai?
מבאי,
Mibaya.
מבאיה, ארמית.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
אמר,
Aramaic.
כן. אמר רב חסדא,
Chista.
חיסדא, לא קשי, הבחולה, בחולה, בבריאה.
Habechole.
בחולה,
Habebari.
חולה. בחולה, אוקיי. בחולה, בבריא.
Lo sheyesh b'chilot. Habechole, right? V'habebari. So, can you translate it? Do you understand what you read? Not so much. Anybody here translate this?
I'll have a go at it.
Okay. You're brave. Go, do it.
I mean, unless it be,
No. Go ahead. And if you
um,
don't know something, just say I don't know, but at least give it a try.
um, hashta. So why does it say why within 2 years do we educate them, and why and why do we say 2 years and 1 year?
Okay,
Um,
that's okay. I'm going to stop you.
why does the Mishnah say two
What
years
does
and
hashta mean? What does hashta mean?
I took an educated guess that was clearly wrong. Um,
Well, it's in davening. Now I
right,
understand
it's
that
in
you
the Kaddish, Hashta Bagalam.
right. So what does that mean? Hashta uvagala. Do you know what that means?
Well, sort of the second means in sort of in greatness.
No.
No, okay, then I'm clearly wrong. Okay,
No, okay, no.
playing it like
But
playing hockey.
I appreciate the after. Hashta means now.
No, okay. Oh, right. Okay,
You
great,
should know
cool.
it actually from the Haggadah.
Right.
Hashata hacha l'shana haba'a b'Yerushalayim.
Right.
So hashata literally means this year.
Mhm.
So hashta means now. Hashta in this context, it means now. Shata by itself means year. It's like shana. Hashta means now. Okay, so hashta, but in this in Lashon Gemara, it's a setup for a kind of a question. So literally means now, achshav, before 2 years. Now, before 2 years, we educate them. Lehu is otam. We educate them. Bifnei shana mibaye. Before a year, is that necessary? Is it needed? So the hashta it's a setup. It's saying, it's as if to say, if I know, in other words, now, given what I know, it says, before 2 years, mechanchin lahu, 2 years prior, we haven't defined yet what the prior is, but it says 2 years prior, we educate them. 1 year prior, is it necessary? What's the question?
Yep. I mean, since it says that we educate them at 2 years, then wouldn't 1 year be included? Why do we need to say 1 year?
Very good.
Be included in the 2 years.
Right. If you're doing it if you're mechanchin for 2 years prior, obviously you're going to be mechanchin. You're not going to skip the next year. You're going to be. It means beginning 2 years prior. I'm going to do this. So it means also 1 year prior. I'm going to do it. So Amar Rav Chisda. So Rav Chisda answers this question. And so let's understand the question in the formulation of the Mishnah. The Mishnah presumably could have said, "Ein ma'aninutam b'yom kippurim, aber machanchinutam lifnei shana," and stopped. And then I would know also lifnei shana. I'm sorry. It should have said machanchinutam lifnei shanatayim, and it could have left out lifnei shana, and I know also lifnei shana. So lifnei shana is superfluous. That's the question. Why do I need for the Mishnah to say lifnei shana? Maze mosif. So Rav Chisda answered, says, Lo kasha. There's no difficulty. And kasha, as I mentioned before, generally means not solely, but it often means contradiction. It's a difficulty which is a contradiction. So here it's not precisely a contradiction, but it's a difficulty. So it's not a difficulty in the Mishnah. Ha b'chole, ha bilari. This one is talking about one who's ill, and this is talking about one who is healthy. So what is the ha b'chole and what is the ha b'bari? What's it referring to in the Mishnah? Go ahead.
Achole is the one which starts 1 year before Pirko, and the Bari, it's 2 years before.
Before, right.
Before,
So according to Rashi, the before, Rashi says it's a year before Samuch Pirko, which is actually 2 years before Pirko. And the Bari would be Shnatayim Lifnei Samuch Pirko, which is 3 years before.
why does he add a year then? Where does
So-
he take this additional year from?
So what we're going to see, we'll see clearly that this seems to be the way Rav Huna and Rav Nachman understand the Mishnah. But I think it's also, in other words, the reason that we have Amoraim who understand it that way is because the Mishnah itself doesn't tell us Shana Lifnei Ma, right? That's why I emphasize it. And so it leaves open the question. You might think the most obvious thing is, as the Michael Werner said. In other words, at what I might say a year before or 2 years before, these children are no longer children, right? Because it says hatinokot. It's a reasonable pshat in the Mishnah. It says tinokot, lifnei shanav, lifnei shnatayim. A year before, 2 years before, they are no longer tinokot. So that would argue for the pshat that it's 1 year or 2 years before they reach their age of maturity, 12 in a day and 13 a day, for a girl and a boy respectively. But let's read a little further now. Amar Rav Huna. So Michael Schwartz, you want to give it a go? Amar Rav Huna.
Okay. Amar Rav Huna, ben Shmona v'ben Tesha, mechachin oto l'shaot, ben Eser of ben Echad Esra mashlimin b'derabanan, ben Shtaim Esra mashlimin b'deraita b'tinokot. Tinoket.
Bitinoket. Okay. So I'm going to set aside all of the grammatical issue of gender, which Paul raised before, but let's just translate it. So go ahead. You want to say Amar Rav Huna? Rav Huna said.
Rav Huna says a child of 8 and a child of 9, we educate them according to hours. A child of 10 and a child of 11 completes the fast midrabanan from the rabbinic fast, and then from 12 they complete it according to the Torah, the Torah law, as a girl child.
Okay, right. Bitinoket. In other words, the last word, bitinoket, is descriptive of the whole din of Rav Huna, right? So when we talk about a girl, Rav Huna says, so even though it says ben, it doesn't say bat, okay, we're leaving that aside. A girl who is 8 or a girl who is 9, we educate them by hours. A girl who's 11, a girl who's 12, completes the fast midrabanan. So there's a time that, despite the fact that the Mishnah said, Hatinokot ein ma'aninotan b'yom kippurim, Rav Huna says that's true for a girl up until she's 11, up until she's 10 or 11. But from that time on, he would say ma'aninotan. And once she's 12, she has to finish the fast midioraita. So this alludes to the question that Paul raised. We see Rav Huna introduces this idea that a year or 2 years prior to a girl reaching the age of majority, she must fast midirabanan. She has to fast midirabanan. So we now have this idea that Rav Huna expresses. There's this idea of chinuch l'sha'ot. The idea of chinuch l'sha'ot, which we've explained, right? That they're gonna we make them eat later than they're accustomed to. Now, Rav Nachman Amar, Michael Werner, you're up. Rav Nachman Amar.
Rav Nachman Amar, Ben Tesha, Mechanchin Otan.
You skipped Ben Tesha.
Oh, Ben Tesha, Ben Eser, Mechanchin Otam L'Shaot. Ben Achat Esre, Ben Shtem Esre, Mishlimin.
Mashlimin.
Mashlimin. De Rabbanan. Ben Shlos Esre, Mashlimin, Midoraita Betinok. So Rav Nachman says between 9 or starting from 9 and starting from 10, one educates them by hours. Starting with 11 and starting with 12, they fulfill the fast according to midrabanan, according to oral law, and from
there's no midirabanan.
According midrabanan.
Oral law can still be midoraita. Midirabanan means that there was a takana from the rabbanan that they have to do this.
Okay.
Go ahead.
And starting from 13, they fulfill the mitzvah, midoraita. This is for male children.
Okay, and I just want to say, mashlim. What does mashlim literally mean? Not fulfill. What does it mean? Lashlim.
Mean to pay, no, or to.
That's the shalem. It's from the same root. What's lahashlim?
So it's not to fulfill, clearly, otherwise we wouldn't be asking.
It's effectively to fulfill, but that's not what it means. Anybody? Paul, Michael, what does Ladashlim mean?
To complete.
To complete. Right. Right. Mashlimin, they make the fast shalem, like they do the whole fast. They have to complete the fast. Okay, so Rashi points out here a couple of things. So one of them is why 8 and 9, and why do we have these groups of 2 years? 8 and 9 mechanchim, 10 and 11 mashlimin. For the boy, 9 and 10 mechanchim, and for the girl and for the boy, 11 and 12 mashlimin. So why do we have 2 ages for each of these steps? Why doesn't it just say if so? Ben Shmona. It's the question we asked before. So if it says Ben Shmona, wouldn't we also say for Ben Tesha? In other words, if we make them start to be fasting l'sha'ot when they're 8, obviously we're going to make them fast l'sha'ot when they're 9. So
So
what?
no.
Go ahead.
And presumably this would be according to what Rava Hista said, which is one year.
Which was
2 years is if they're healthy, and 1 year is if they're sickly.
very good. Okay, so that's going to be our assumption. Rashi says this: Amar Rav Huna ben Shmone libari, for a healthy girl, Shavra Shmona, that she's completed 8 years. V'nichneset l'teisha u'v'tinoket k'demisayim milte. And it's talking about a girl, k'demisayim milte, k'moshe misayim dvaro, the way he finishes what he's saying. The Havi Shnat Teisha Arba Shanim Lifnei Pirka. Her 9th year is 4 years. In other words, when's her 9th year? When she's 8 years and a day. Is her 9th, right? Then that's her 9th year. That's 4 years before she's 12 and a day. It's 4 years before she reaches her parak. And what we see again, so we see from both Rav Huna and from Rav Nachman, that they've introduced an idea that there's hashlama midurabanan, that you have to finish the fast midurabanan. So they use the term mechanchin for what ages?
So they use it for 3 years. Oh, so
It's for
Motivation.
Shmona v'te, right? So they use it for the year. For the girl, it's for 8 and 9. For the boy, they use mechanchin for 9 and 10, which is 8 and 9, and 9 and 10 is 4 years and 3 years prior to the parak of the boy, of the girl and the boy. Okay.
That looks very early.
It looks very early, but
it's an exaggeration.
Lav Nafka. I mean, I
Hmm?
didn't know. I didn't know. My actually. Well, I'll leave that for a moment. Let's just. But this is how they're saying. So what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said, "Mechanchin otan lifnei shana v'lifnei shnatayim." So now I again see this lashon of mechanchin. So So then I'll say this is how Rav Huna and Rav Nachman understand mechanchin in the Mishnah. Mechanchin otan lifnei shana v'lifnei shnatayim is 1 year and 2 years before they have to fast. Before they have to fast midurabanan. This is the time. It's a year or 2 years prior to when they're going to have to start fasting midurabanan. It's going to be 4 years and 3 years before they have to fast midioraita. That's what effectively comes out of Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. And just to clarify again, Rav Nachman Omer, Lo Palig Rav Nachman ad Rav Huna. Rav Nachman does not argue with Rav Huna, even though they say different years. Ela Mar Piresh Mile de Tinoket, Mar Kilo Ha'adon, right? Are the one of them, Rav Huna, explains Mile Dvarim Shel Tinoket. Umar Piresh Mile de Tinok. And the other teacher, is explaining Dvarim of Tinok. All right, so Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, Kai B'chada Shita, they stand in the same Shita, the same opinion. So in contrast, now we have Rabbi Yochanan. So Paul, why don't you read Rabbi Yochanan?
Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Ashlamad Rabbanan, ליחה,
It's leka.
לקה,
תמשיך, בן
איפה, רגע, איפה? בן 10, בן 11, מחנכים אותו לשעות, בן 12 משלימים מדאורייתא.
Okay, so what does Rabbi Yochanan say? Hashlama d'Rabbanan leka. What's leka? Anybody know?
There isn't.
There isn't. Ein. Hashlama d'Rabbanan ein. There is no Hashlama d'Rabbanan. So what does that mean? That there's no Hashlama d'Rabbanan?
So he starts the whole procedure 1 year later because there's
Okay,
no.
but first just explain the words. What is Hashlama d'Rabbanan that he's saying doesn't exist? What's the Hashlama d'Rabbanan?
What I said before, בין 11 ובין 12 משלימים דרבנן, according that this is the law of the rabbis and not of the Torah.
Okay, very good. So Rabbi Yochanan says Hashlama d'Rabbanan leka. What does that mean practically? Now you can say what you were starting to say. What does it mean practically?
So if there's no year for this Hashlama d'Rabbanan, so immediately you have Hashlama d'Oraita and you started
Okay, so actually,
a year later.
okay, excuse me. So yes, okay. So Rabbi Yochanan says Hashlama d'Rabbanan leka. There is no din d'Rabbanan that a child has to complete the fast. Ein davar kazeh. So what mayesh? In other words, there still has to be a din of inui by a child. That's what we get from the Mishnah. So he says, ben eser ben achadesrei. Go ahead.
It's all chinuch. It's not something which the rabbis prescribed. You just have to get the children used.
Very good. So it's right. So, and I'm glad that you emphasize it's mechanchin. The only thing that we have prior to their age of, prior to their parak, prior to the age where they have to, is chinuch. That's all we have is chinuch. So, according to Rav Nachman and Rav Huna, first you have 2 years, 1 or 2 years of chinuch, and then you have 1 or 2 years of hashlama. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, you have 1 or 2 years of chinuch, and there is no hashlama prior to the parak, right? Ben Eser ben Achanasri mechanchin oto l'shaot. Ben Shtemesre mashlimin midioraita. For who? Who's mashlimin midioraita? B'Shtemesre.
Atinoket.
It's for a boy, I think.
For,
what you say.
no. What Michael said, it's for the girl. Right?
It's for
the
okay.
So he only brings the example of the girl, but we're going to assume then he would also say, it's again, it's confusing because he uses the word ben, but he says ben shtemeser mashlimimi deoraita, but he really, it's bat, which by the way, I think it's very interesting because this is just a side note. It and this is it's a
How
function
do you
of.
know that it's for a girl? As you say, it's written Ben. It should be for a boy.
Okay, we know we're going to know that not from the immediate context. You're right to say that, but we know it from elsewhere, right? We know it from other places that a boy doesn't have his chiyuvim until he's 13 in a day, and a girl till she's 12 in a day. We know, but I think it also it's a reflection of the way we think of language and the way language was actually used, right? So we were all brought up in an age with formalized grammar and grammar books and dictionaries and things that are defined, but practically not all that's not always the way people spoke or even wrote, right? In a more colloquial way. And all you have to do is read Tanakh, which was written, over hundreds of years, and we see there's, in fact, including gender, we have words that are sometimes used in one gender and sometimes in the other. It's common and nowadays, like for modern Hebrew speakers, there's no, this is the way you do it. Like you have to do it like this, because for whatever reason, language became more formalized. But here, because we have to assume it's not formalized in the same way, we have to pay close attention to the underlying meaning. Okay, that's just a little comment on language. But okay, so now
maybe he understands the Ben Tesha as a word, as a 9 years old.
Yeah, in other words, it's ki'ilu, it's just a concept. That's how you say 9 years old, ben lebat, ben leben, ben lebat.
Yes,
Ki'ilu.
maybe I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, it could be, and also
It's מטבע לשון ככה.
Yeah, kacha. Right, that's just the way people spoke, and that's what. Okay, but so, but I could say that the first day I was Rav Huna, and he was talking about a girl, and how Rabbi Yochanan is coming in contrast. So he's replying, as it were, immediately to Rav Huna. But he would also reply to Rav Nachman by saying, Hashlamad Rabbanan Leka, and then he would say Ben Shtemis Ben Ben Shtemis or Ben Shoshesrei B'Chanchinu Tolushod, etc. In any event, so now this is what we have. We have a machloket between Rav Huna and Rav Nachman on one side, and Rabbi Yochanan on the other side. So their machloket at this point, it's in practical halacha. It's in halacha l'maaseh. When do I start chinuch l'shaot? So according to Rav Huna, I'm going to start it either 4 years or 3 years prior to the child's coming of age. And then there'll be another 2 years, 1 year or 2 year, where they have to fast. And they don't call that chinuch, they call that hashlama. Rabbi Yochanan says, by contrast, there is no din of hashlama. And so it's always going to start 1 year or 2 years prior to Pirkan. So now the Gemara is going to try to challenge one or the other dayot, or try to resolve these dayot by bringing Tanaitic sources. In other words, now these are Amoraim. All of these are Rav Huna, Rav Nachman, Rav Yochanan. They're all Amoraim. Their dayot have to fit into Tanaitic sources. So what's the first Tanaitic source? The first Tanaitic source is our Mishnah. So let's see, Michael Schwartz, Tanan.
Tanan, Hatinokot ein ma'anin otan b'yom HaKippurim, אבל מחנכין אותן לפני שנה ולפני שתיים.
Okay, yeah, and in the Mishnah, so you can see even in the same Gemara, the Mishnah, the Girsan Gemara for the Mishnah was Shnatayim, and here when it's repeating the Mishnah, it says Shtayim, but it means the same thing. Okay, so now the Gemara is bringing Tanan. What does Tanan mean?
We learn in a Mishnah.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
We don't force children to fast on Yom Kippur, but we educate them a year or 2 years, before a year or before 2 years.
Okay, so now Michael Werner, read a little further. Bishlama. Do you see it? Oh, you're still muted.
Okay, yes. I was mercifully muted. Nishlamad the Rav Huna, the Rav Nachman, Livnei Shana, Livnei Shanatayim, Livnei Shana, Lid Rabbanan, Livnei
No, read the word.
Li, oh,
Divrehen.
Livrehen, Livnei Shanatayim, Livrehen. Ella Rabbi Yochanan Kashya.
Okay, stop there. Stop there. So this is a kasha. In other words, we see that whatever the Gemara is saying here, again, even if you didn't understand what you read, this much you can understand. What does bishlama mean?
There's an agreement, no, between Rav
No.
Huna and Rabbi Nachman, or
No. I've mentioned this before. That's not what it means. What does bishlama mean? Okay, I'll say it again. I didn't say it today, but I've said it at least for the last 2 or 3 shiurim, and we've had it before. So now, this is a style in structure of Mishnah. It starts off here by bishlama, and ends off with kasha. So bishlama is the part that's not kasha. Bishlama literally means bishalom. And what it means contextually is that, if you want to say more literally, like this goes peacefully for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Bishalom, the Rav Huna, the Rav Nachman. In other words, there's no kasha, there's no difficulty. So bishlama, this goes well for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Lifnei shana, lifnei shtayim, what goes well for them? When the Mishnah says, Lifnei shana, lifnei shtayim. How does it go well? Lifnei shana, ledivrehen, lifnei shtayim, ledivrehen. A year before their words, literally their words, and 2 years before their words. So, Ela Rabbi Yochanan kasha, but rather this is going to be a problem. It's going to be difficult for Rabbi Yochanan. So, again, let's just understand the literal meaning of what's going on. So this goes well. What did we just read that goes well for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman? What goes well for them?
Mishnah.
And what specifically in the Mishnah?
That we.
You don't have to guess. It's right here in the Gemara.
Reading. I'm looking at it. I'm about to read it. Yes, we do not afflict them. I know. Excuse me. We educate them before 1 year and before 2 years.
Okay, and so now, why does that go well for them? Because I'm going to say, what does that mean? Lifnei shana l'divrehen, lifnei shtayim l'divrehen. What's divrehen here mean? Whose words? What does it mean? Their words. A year before their words, and 2 years before their words. What's l'divrehen?
So this is according to the words of the two of Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. In other words,
No. What's l'divrehen?
It's to the words of the rabbis.
The words of the rabbis. L'divrei. And what did the rabbis say? What was the Rabbanan?
That there is a fast, the Rabbanan, before there's a fast, Deraita.
Right. So, and just in general, right, we have this as a term, the divrei hen, we contrast like something that's min haTorah or mi divrei hen, something that's from the Torah and from their words, meaning the words of the Rabbanan, the words of Chazal. And that's what it means here. So,
It
Bishlama,
means the Rabbanan, those Rabbanan.
it means the Rabbanan that Rav Huna and Rav Nachman referred to when they said Mashlimin mi de Rabbanan. That's what the Divrei is the Divrei of the Rabbanan.
Of those Rabbanan, yes.
Of those Rabbanan. Because in a moment, the Gemara is going to use the term Rabbanan to refer to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, which is what Michael Werner almost said, because you might think that that's what it means. But in this context, this is what it means. And and by the way, Michael Werner, I don't blame you for thinking that, because those are the rabbis that we're talking about. But I didn't want to squeeze it out of you anymore. So okay, let's read this again. Bishlama Rav Huna Rav Nachman. So we just read the Mishnah. We're going to say the Mishnah goes well for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman when the Mishnah said Lifnei Shana v'Lifnei Shtayim. Because why does it go well? Because it means they'll say what it means is a year before their chiyuv de Rabbanan, or 2 years before the chiyuv, the mashlimin of the Rabbanan. That's why it says, in other words, that's our understanding now of the Mishnah. Lifnei shana v'lifnei shtayim. It's a year or 2 years before the child does have to fast. Elo Rabbi Yochanan kasha. But those words now are going to be difficult for Rabbi Yochanan. Why? Why is that? Why is the Mishnah now a problem for Rabbi Yochanan?
Since Rabbi Yochanan doesn't believe that there's such a thing as rabbinic fast, when he says a year or 2 years, it can't be before that, a year or 2 years before that rabbinic fast.
Right. So in other words, it comes back to this question of what do we think the words of Lifnei Shana v'Lifnei Shnatayim in the Mishnah mean? So here in the Gemara is saying, look, Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, what do they understand? They say it means 1 year or 2 years before that child has to fast midu Rabbanan. And why is that? And I see this from the words of Rav Huna Rav Nachman, again, because they use the term mechanchin. That is, they interpret the mechanchin of the Mishnah to mean 4 years and 3 years before the fast dioraita, but it also means 1 year or 2 years before they have to fast midu Rabbanan. So at this moment, I understand what I'm understanding about Rav Huna Rav Nachman is that they say there's such a thing as chinuch and such a thing as hashlama. So in chinuch, so now they're saying, so the Mishnah, I can understand the Mishnah in that way. The Mishnah says lifnei shana v'lifnei shtayim. That's when they have chinuch. So when did Rav Huna and Rav Nachman say that was? That was 1 year or 2 years before they have to fast midu Rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan, as Michael Schwartz points out, he holds there is no hashlama du Rabbanan. So what can the Mishnah possibly mean? What can the Mishnah possibly mean 1 year or 2 years before the hashlama du Rabbanan? So Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan. So Paul, Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan.
Where are you?
Here, Amar lach.
Amar lach, okay. Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan, Mai Shana או 2 סמוך לפרקן. This is what Rashi said.
Well,
this
no, actually,
what Rashi said. He uses this samuch.
So now we understand. So
it's 1 year earlier. No.
N- That's what we'll look at. We'll look at Rashi here in a minute. Not exactly, not exactly, because the way Rashi set up the Mishnah, he really set it up more along the lines of Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. And now the Chiddush is going to be that Rabbi Yochanan doesn't read it that way. But you're not wrong. But I want to be medayek here, so we'll say. So what we understand is, okay, Rav Huna and Rav Nachman say that chinuch is 1 year, 2 years prior to hashlama l'divrehen. And Rabbi Yochanan can't read the Mishnah that way because he doesn't hold there is such a thing as hashlama midirabanan. So Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan would say to you, when my shana oshtaim, in other words, what does the Mishnah mean when it said mechanchin lifnei shana v'lifnei shtaim? It means 1 year or 2 years samuch lefirkan, near to their perek. In other words, directly in this context now it means directly before their perek. So shana shnatayim doesn't mean 1 year, 2 years before they start fasting midurabanan, because Rabbi Yochanan says they don't fast midurabanan. It's 1 year, 2 years before they have to fast miduraita, and that's samuch lefirkan. Right? Rashi says, El Rabbi Yochanan kasha. L'didei lo mitukma matnitin klal. Right? L'didei, like, I'm sorry, 1 second. L'didei, for him, lo mitukma matnitin klal. Matnitin mishnatenu lo 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 mikuyemet, right? You can't uphold the Mishnah at all. There's no kiyum to this Mishnah. The ha'amrinan hashlama d'Rabbanan leka, because they say, meaning they here means Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says there is no hashlama d'Rabbanan. Ditema matnitin chadektani, to say that the Mishnah is talking singularly, kedokimna alibid Rav Huna v'Rav Nachman, v'reisha b'chole, v'seifa b'bari, kedokima Rav Chisda, where according to Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, the way they would have read the Mishnah, we understand they understand the Mishnah, that the reisha that says shana, that's for a chole. The seifa that says shnatayim, that's bibari, like Rav Chisda says. Nami lo tukma, you still can't uphold it. D'matnitin ktani shalosha bari ushtayim lechole. Rabbi Yochanan mar shtayim lebari v'achat lechole. Because according to the way I've understood the Mishnah until now, the Mishnah is saying 3 years before for the bari, 3 years prior for the healthy child, because it's going to be right that as it were that the year before they become chayavim midoraita. Okay, so the Lashon, I'm not going to dwell on this. The Lashon of Rashi here is a little bit tricky. But Amar lach Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Yochanan will answer by saying, Lo titne lifnei shana, don't learn it a year before to mean demashma shtayim. Lifnei shtayim, demashma shalosh shanim. In other words, don't learn this the way Rav Huna and Rav Nachman learned it, to say that 1 year before really means 2 years before, and 2 years before really means 3 years before. Ela ema, rather, I will say, ema, I will say, Mechanchin ota shana samuch lefirka bechole, ushtayim levari. Okay. So, again, to summarize, what do we have so far? We have our Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Mechanchin right? Ein ma'anin et hatinokot, but mechanchin otan lifnei shana v'lifnei shtayim. Right? Bishur shiyu regilim b'mitzvot. We have Rav Chisda who says, so why does, if it says shtayim, why do I need shana achat? It's to tell me that there's a difference if the child is healthy, which would be lifnei shnatayim, but lifnei shana would be for a choleh, for a sickly child. But at that point in the Gemara, I still don't know a year before what or 2 years before what. So comes Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, and they say it's a year or 2 before the child has to complete the fast, midu rabbanan. Rabbi Yochanan comes and says, no, there is no hashlama midu rabbanan. There's only chinuch. So then the Gemara brought our Mishnah again and says, okay, let's look at the Mishnah. The Mishnah says lifnei shana v'lifnei shtayim. So until now, I say Bishlama Rav Huna Rav Nachman. For Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, the Mishnah goes well because what does it mean? Lifnei shana v'lifnei shtayim. 1 year before, 2 years before. It's 1 year or 2 years before they have to complete the fast midu rabbanan. But then Rabbi Yochanan, for Rabbi Yochanan Takasha, because he holds there is no hashlama midu rabbanan. So Rabbi Yochanan says, "Enachinami." There is no hashlama midu rabbanan, and the Mishnah means 1 year or 2 year before they have to complete the fast midoraita. So for him, prior to the age of mitzvot, there's only chinuch l'shaot. That's all there is. There's only chinuch l'shaot. So now I'm going to bring another Tannaitic source. And this is going to, again, it's going to be a challenge to one or the other sides of this argument. So Michael Werner, Tashema. Do you see it?
Yes, okay, yes. I started reading with my mute on, sorry. Tashma, Tane Rabba bar Shmuel, Atinkot ein me'anin otan biyom hakipurim, aval mehanchin otan shana o shnotayim samuch lifirkan.
Stop. So what does Tashema mean?
We learn in a Baraita.
It usually means that we're going to learn, and so I'm going to bring another source. But what does it literally mean? Does anybody know? What does ta mean?
Come in here.
Come in here or come and learn. In an Aramaic, in more of this Aramaic context, the Shema would mean to learn. And we have this also in Hebrew, like mashma'ut, right? Is implication or what's learned from something. Okay, so Tashema means come and learn. I'm going to bring now a Braita that I want you to pay attention to because maybe it's going to resolve, maybe I can use it to resolve the which side of the argument, Rabbi Yochanan or Rav Nachman and Rav Huna, I'm going to go by. So what does Tani mean?
Literally, it was taught.
Right. It was,
said.
yeah, right. It was taught, and what it means in this context, Tani is brought in the Gemara when a Mishnah is being quoted by an Amorah. So the Amorah wasn't the source; he didn't make up the Braita, but Rabba Bar Shmuel, who's an Amorah, he is learning this Mishnah, this Braita. He's the one who's saying over this Braita. So what now? Okay, so Michael Werner, what did the Braita say that I translate the Braita and then tell me what it says that I didn't see already? Tell me what it says that I didn't know that I need to bring this Braita.
So children, we do not afflict children or literally fast them on Yom.
Well, I don't think is fast. Afflict them, is there? You can't fast a person.
Actually, you
don't-
can. I think it can be a transitive verb.
To fast somebody else?
I think is it? Well, I'll look that up.
Okay.
Okay,
We'll say afflict.
we'll say afflict. Yes. So we don't afflict children. Children, we do not afflict them on Yom Kippur. However, we do educate them a year or 2 years that are adjacent to their majority.
Very good. So what's introduced here that I didn't see before in the Mishnah?
That we educate them a year or 2 years prior to their majority.
And out of that sentence, what particularly is new?
Sort of the idea.
Not sort of. What specifically?
Right. That this idea that the period is what's samuch to the period that's adjacent to the majority.
Okay, so right. So specifically these words, samuch lefirkan. Basically, from here to here is a quote from the Mishnah. Tinokot em maninotam b'yom kippurim mechanchinotam shana o shtayim. That's the Mishnah. The Braita adds in the words samuch lefirkan. So now, Paul, you can read the next part if you're still with us. Oh, I'm not sure he's still with us. Okay. Michael Schwartz, Bishlama.
Bishlama the Rebbe Yochanan Nicha, Ella Rav Huna Rav Nachman Kasha, Amri Lach Rabbanan Mai Chinuk Nami Dikatani Hashlama.
Okay. So what's the beginning? Bishlama Rebbe Yochanan Nicha. What does that mean?
It goes well for Rebbe Yochanan's opinion. I'm not sure what Nicha means because it agrees with it. It's exactly the same.
Yeah. So Nicha, like Noach lo, like it works well for him. Continue. I'm looking for maybe better words, but Bishlama Rabbi Yochanan Nicha. What's Nicha? What's Noach for what goes well for Rabbi Yochanan?
Okay.
What goes well for him?
Oh, because his opinion is that the year or two is Smuch LePirkan.
Okay, so exactly. So this Braita says essentially the way we answered for Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan, right? We answered for Rabbi Yochanan to say this is how Rabbi Yochanan would understand our Mishnah. Amalach Rabbi Yochanan, my Shana Oshtaim, Samuch Lefirkan. Then I bring a Braita that says Shana Oshtaim, Samuch Lefirkan. So Bishlama Rabbi Yochanan Nicha. So the Mishnah is Nicha for Rabbi Yochanan. El Rav Huna Rav Nachman Kasha. Why is this Braita Kasha on Rav Huna and Rav Nachman?
Because
Michael Schwartz.
Because their opinion is that it's not Smuch LePirkan, but there's that 1 or 2 year period of the Hashlama D'Rabbanan.
Very good. So now the tables have turned, right? In other words, before we said the Mishnah is a Kasha and Rabbi Yochanan, and it goes well for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. So he said, no, I can answer for Rabbi Yochanan. It's Samuch, because he holds, it means Samuch Lefirkan. Then Rabbi Bar Shmuel brings a Braita that says exactly like Rabbi Yochanan. So now I say, okay, so now the whole thing goes very well for Rabbi Yochanan, but for Rav Huna, Rav Nachman, this Braita now is a problem. And I'm going to look to this Braita to be a legitimate perush of the Mishnah before I'm going to look at any Amora and what he thinks the Mishnah means. So now here, Amri Lach Rabbanan. So the Rabbanan will say to you. So who's the Rabbanan here?
Are these the Rabbanan of the Hashlamat D'Rabbanan?
No. So who's the Rabbanan here? And this, I'm. That's why I told you this before. But
Rav Huna and Rav
who's
Nachman.
right? So it means those rabbis, Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, just like it said. Remember when it asked the kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, it said Bishlam Rav Huna Rav Nachman ba 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 el Rabbi Yochanan kasha, and then it said Amalach Rabbi Yochanan. Right, so it says it's a kasha Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Yochanan would answer as follows. He would say to you. So here also, Bishlam Rabbi Yochanan, blah, 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 but for Rav Huna Rav Nachman's kasha, so Amrilach Rabbanan. It would be these rabbis. It's just a quick way of saying Rav Huna Rav Nachman. Amri is the plural of Amar, right? They would say to you, these Rabbanan. So what would they say? My chinuch nami diktani. Hashlama.
So what is the education, the chinuch that is also taught?
Yes, that's the literal translation. Very
Yeah,
good.
but hashlama, the finishing that fast, the Rabbanan, but I don't understand exactly.
Okay. So, what was problematic for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman in the Breita? What was their problem?
The idea of samuch leperkan as opposed to the mitzvah derabanan.
Okay, very good. So, excuse me 1 second. So, when the Breita said "Mechanchinot an shana u'shtayim l'samuch lefirkan," so now I can't understand how Rav Huna and Rav Nachman can read that because they say chinuch. What was their definition of chinuch?
A year or 2 years prior to the mitzvah derabanan.
That what?
2 years
What's
prior. I'm sorry.
no? You're telling me the right time. But what was the chinuch? What was the education? What was the lesson that was being
I'm
taught to
sorry. Yes.
children?
Oh, yes. Yeah. So we educated the bishaot. We
Oh, very good, very good. So for them, chinuch means that we ma'aninotan the sha'ot, right? So that's the mechanchinot on the sha'ot. So when they try to read the Breita, this is what we think they're going to say. V'mechanchin aotan l'sha'ot shana o shtaim samuch lefirkan. That's a direct contradiction to the way Rav Nachman and Rav Huna understood the Mishnah. Because they say mechanchin otan l'sha'ot shana o shtaim lifnei hashlama. So how would they understand the Breita? The Breita seems to be a direct contradiction to what they're saying. So Amrilach Rabbanan, so they'll say to you, my chinuch nami diktani. What's this? Not the nami here means what's this chinuch also? Meaning, what's this second iteration of chinuch? Because I had chinuch in the Mishnah, and now I have chinuch in the Breita. That's the nami. Like, what's this second iteration of chinuch? That diktane, that we learn, meaning that we learn in the Breita. Hashlama. What's the chinuch here? The chinuch is that they have to complete the fast. In other words, the mechanchin here in the Breita means something different than the mechanchinotan in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, mechanchin meant mechanchin l'sha'ot. And in the Breita, it means mechanchin hashlama. So now the Gemara says, Michael Schwartz, umi kari lechinuch. Go ahead.
V'mi kari lechinuch hashlama v'hatanya izeh chinuch haya regila ochel b'shtei sha'ot ma'akilin oto l'shalosh v'shalosh ma'akilin oto ba'arba. And is the chinuch called hashlama? it's taught in a baraita. Izeh chinuch. What is the chinuch? If one was Ragil used to eating for 2 hours, we feed him on for the third hour. The third. It doesn't say l'shalosh for 3.
No, Shulish, for 3.
Okay, for
If
3.
somebody, in other words, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I add an hour. Oh no, but stay shut. But for 2 hours, we feed him for 3, and if it's 3, we feed him for 4.
Right. So the Gemara here is challenging what we answered for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. We answered for Rav Huna and Rav Nachman saying there's chinuch in the Mishnah, and chinuch there means chinuch the sha'ot, and there's chinuch in the Braita, and that chinuch is hashlama. So the Gemara says umikari lechinuch hashlama, right? Do we call chinuch hashlama? Right? Because that's what they say, that this chinuch in the Braita is hashlama. So we say, who says that you can call chinuch hashlama? V'ha Tanya. Here we learn, and Tanya, of course, means we learn in a Braita. Eizeh chinuch. There's a Braita that defines the word chinuch. And what's the definition of the word chinuch? The kitzur, it's what we call chinuch the sha'ot. If he was accustomed to eating at 2 hours, we feed him at 3, meaning 3 hours. If he was accustomed to eating at 3 hours, we feed him at 4 hours. So what's chinuch? Chinuch is chinuch hasha'ot. So what do you mean that chinuch in this second Braita all of a sudden means hashlama? In other words, if I stopped here, then I have to completely reject Rav Huna and Rav Nachman because they can't read the second Braita. And at this point, only Rabbi Yochanan has a fair reading both in the Mishnah and in the Braita. So, Paul, are you with us? No. Okay,
Now,
Mike.
yes.
Now, okay. So you get the final word here. Amar Rava bar Ula.
Amar Rava bar Ula, Ri
Trey.
Chanuchi, Re Chanuchi, Avo.
Havu.
Avo.
Trey chinuchei havu. So what's Trey?
3 years.
No, Trey. Chada Trey. Fata is 3. Trey is 2.
Praise to.
Trey is 2. You're thinking in a Romance language, I think.
Why?
like Deuce Trey. Trey in English, Trey in English is a 3 in cards. Trey in Aramaic is 2. Trey chinuchei havu. There are yesh shnei chinuchim. There are 2 chinuchim. So what is Rava bar Ula saying? What does he mean there's 2 chinuchim? What are these 2 chinuchim?
These are 2 different modalities of chinuch.
Okay, very good. And now tell me, and what are they?
Sha'ot and completing the fast.
So he says, in other words, until now, I have gone with this idea, which seemed to be established by Rav Huna and Rav Nachman themselves, because they both use this lashon of Ben Shimon ben Tesha mechanchinoto l'sha'ot, and then mashlimin midurabanan. So they themselves contrasted chinuch with hashlama. But now that they're challenged because I have a braita that contradicts their position, that chinuch right here from the braita v'amachanchinu tanshana shtayim lifnei samuch lefirkan, that means that if I take that based on the definition of chinuch ad kan, then the Braita would mean Ava machanchin otan lishaot shana u'shtaim samuch lefirkan. And they say no. They say machanchin otan lishaot 4 and 3 years samuch lefirkan. So they can't read the Braita. So the Gemara answers for them, no. So what does chinuch mean here? It means hashlama. It's just another word for hashlama. And then the Gemara pushes back and said, no, I have a Braita that tells me specifically what chinuch means. And the Braita says specifically that chinuch means l'sha'ot. So Rava Barula says, no, there's two chinuchim. There's two definitions or two modalities, as Michael said, of chinuch. So to step back, just to give maybe a little bit broader view. So what do we see? What's the concept of chinuch generally, not here specifically in Yoma? When we talk about chinuch for a child, vis-a-vis mitzvot, what does that mean?
We're educating them in how to do the mitzvot.
Okay, in the simplest way, we're teaching them, we're educating them how to do mitzvot. And so the reason why do I bring it up? Because what Rava Bar Ula, it might sound like a kvetch, but it's simply a reasonable understanding that there's a broader concept of chinuch. The broader concept of chinuch is what Michael Werner said. We're going to educate them about the mitzvah. So here we're educating them about the mitzvah of inui on Yom HaKippurim. And so it doesn't have to be limited to this chinuch l'sha'ot. Any way that we teach them, we can place under the heading of chinuch. And so it turns out that depending on their age, according to Rav Huna, according to Rav Nachman, then there's chinuch l'sha'ot, and there's also chinuch that's hashlama. That's the end of the sugya. It's 9:00. This was very good. I'm proud of all of you. And I'm going to continue as much as possible to keep up with this direct engagement. I think it's working. And next week, so I thought we would do this today, but it's fine that we didn't. Next week, I'll show you in halacha the way Rishonim pasked. But here's a question for you. Based on the way the Gemara ends up, what do you think the halacha is? Is it like Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, or is it like Rabbi Yochanan?
Based on the way on Rava Bar Ula, I would say it's like Rav Huna and Rav Nachman, because you have the two types of education.
Okay, so you could argue that because the Gemara, because Rav Bar Ula at the end comes in and supports them, and that's the way the sugya ends. Maybe the Gemara is telling me that that's my conclusion. My conclusion is I want to uphold Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Anybody want to make an argument for Rabbi Yochanan?
Don't we generally paskin like Rabbi Yochanan? Don't we? It doesn't.
Yes. So that's actually that's a very good argument. Rabbi Yochanan was the Gadol Hador in Eretz Yisrael, and generally we're going to hold like Rabbi Yochanan over other Amoraim, and so we're going to leave this right now in the balance, and next week we'll see how different Rishonim understood how to paskin. Shkoyach, everybody. Have a good rest of your week and Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye, Leto. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.